Tell Sean he can't leave.
Right now, I have to stop saying.
There we are. Look at that. There's 3 of us today. I actually kind of like the Sean a little. Well, maybe he's not a little wider. He looks like he's a little wider on the screen.
That has to do with how I had to frame when Mason Marchment was on.
Oh,
Sean
okay.
gained more real estate from that.
I like it.
Sean,
Sean,
our little buddy was sitting in between Luds and Owen, though. We'd have to mess with that a little bit.
see, Sean, your territory has expanded ever so slightly.
I can thank Mason Marchment for this, so that's great.
Well, that and Sam getting sick.
It was also because Mason didn't know how to frame himself within the shot, so I had to get really creative with how we fit him on the screen.
You may actually be able to finish your thought tonight or this afternoon.
Yeah, we're celebrating that right now. So.
I would like to point out, because there was very little to do with the show, so I'll do it now. I saw Mason this morning. He was one of the 3 guys that were in the dressing room when we walked in, when they said the room was open. And all 3 of them were trying to get out of there as fast as humanly possible. It was Jamie, it was Rope, and Mason. And Mason was talking with one of the equipment guys, and so I waited because the cameras were setting up like they were going to shoot Jamie, and Jamie was like, peace, and took off, which was really funny. But I could tell Mason was trying his best to not make eye contact with anyone because he wanted to leave. But I was standing in his way, so when he looked up, I'm like, hey, and you could see he's like trying to walk out of the room. I said, thanks for coming on our show. He said, no problem. I said, we kind of laughed as you scored the next night. We'd love that to be a thing. Come on our show, score a goal. He's like, I'll take it. And I said, well, anyway, thanks, appreciate it. I hope you had fun. And off he went. He clearly wanted
to. He didn't volunteer to come in tomorrow afternoon.
He did not.
No, okay.
No, unfortunately. So let's start our pregame show. Sean's here. Sam's not. We'll tell you why in a moment. Here on DLLS Pregame.
Get ready, boys.
It is Monday. How about that? Monday hockey. This is the DLS Stars Pregame Show. It's the Mild, a.k.a. the Wild, and the Stars for the 3rd of 4 meetings in the regular season. He's Sean Shapiro. I was about to point to where I can see him, but he's actually over there on your screen. He's Craig Ludwig. And you notice in between us, although there's room for him, our little buddy Sam Nestler is not here. Thank you, Sean. That was the correct time to laugh. He is a little under the weather. Little buddy.
The SS Minnow has another hole in it.
Yeah, so he's taking on water, so to speak, not literally. But he'll be out today and tomorrow, but we're hoping he'll be back for our shows later in the week. So, Sam, we hope you feel better. And let's get to it. The first thing is pretty obvious lineup news. No changes. Stars got the win. We weren't real thrilled with it the other night, afternoon. Although I asked the hero of the day, Thomas Harley, this morning, and his D partner, Ilya Lyubushkin, separately, because Lyubushkin was there first, and then I talked to Harley. They both, Luds, love the afternoon matinee with no travel afterward, because when I brought up that they're going to do it again.
Anytime you get an overtime goal and 3 or 4 points and you're +3, I don't care what time of the day it is, you love it.
Yes, but both of them agreed that wake up, have a pregame meal, go to the rink and play is way better, and they liked having their evenings available. Go stop, grab a drink, have dinner, hang out with the kids in Lyubushkin's case. He's got 3 of them. They're going to play another afternoon home game against Pittsburgh in 2 weeks, but they have to fly to Minnesota to play the Wild the next day, and they go, oh, that ruins the whole thing because then you don't get your night.
Well, listen, anytime you can be sitting at the pub by 4 o'clock in the afternoon and not have anything the next day, hopefully have a day off, I mean, that's a good shift.
I also don't think they had your issue of trying to find a way to get a couple hours of sleep when you're supposed to be eating a pregame meal because of your timetable.
Well, there's 2 pork chops in every can.
There you go. So you were fine.
We get our nourishment one way or another.
So anyway, Sean, the interesting thing was that they got the win. And as much as we were upset about the performance against the Lightning, they almost won that one in a shootout. And maybe we'd be talking about a 3-game winning streak instead of a 4-game point streak. But this team felt better about their play against the Flyers, at least from a defensive zone and breakout perspective, which I thought was interesting because when I ended the night or the afternoon, the Flyers had a lot more high danger chances than the Stars did.
Yeah, I think this is also a reflection of the standard we expect from the Stars. I think that's another key thing too, right? Where there's a lot of teams that in the NHL right now, back to point streak, back-to-back overtime games, one win, one loss, that they'd be thrilled with that this time of year. And I think that is let's take a quick pause and just look at the positive here. The standard for what we expect from the Stars is so high right now. When you're talking about a team that we expect to compete for a Stanley Cup, top 4 or 5 team in the league, the standard is so high. These stretches happen, and we expect more from this team because of how high the bar is set. This is something where there's a lot of other shows we could be doing right now, and we'd be like, good golly, they almost had a 3-game point streak, and we're thrilled about it. Like, this is just, to me, for one, the Stars have raised the bar and raised their standard, and they're getting held to it. That's great. The game itself on Philly, you kind of go through and you're like, okay, you found a way to win the game, and you didn't play that great. And if you can win when you have your B or C game, that's a positive. Now, and I'll throw this to Luds here because I'm curious his thoughts on this. Is I don't know how many B or C games in a row you get to play though before this becomes a red flag for me. So,
boy, it's like you guys talk, even though I know sometimes you don't talk. But it's very similar to take to what Lud said after the game against the Flyers, which is, we have a extremely high bar for what this team is supposed to be.
I think it's in my past, it's rare to have teams that are playing at a certain level for 60 plus games and then kind of dip a little bit to just figure it out in the first round of the playoffs. Usually, I mean, the pattern always seems to be you don't snap out of it. And again, because I say it all the time, when you're talking about playing in the playoffs, you're playing the same team every other night for 14 days. And there's a lot of things get dialed in, and you make tweaks and you make changes. And when you've got a team, they're taking note, who's ever, again, if we play Colorado, their people are taking notes of the last 10 to 15 games. Here's what's happening. Here's where we see a difference from them a month ago. And here's something we're picking up on. So if teams, whether it's Philly or it's Carolina, they're finding ways to shut this part of their game down a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so let's start implementing some of that because we know they're a good team. If we can take that one part away from them, we have some kind of an edge.
Well, let's talk about that. The fourth line has been good. That's maybe the problem. We talked about that before. Pete addressed that, saying if you're talking about your fourth line and your sixth,
are they good by fourth line standards, or just when you say been good?
I think both.
Because I think by their standards, they're good.
Yeah.
You would like to see a little bit more of that. And, well, again, that's hard to say, but I would like to see a little bit more on how the fourth line plays and has success sprinkled out through the other
right,
lines.
Because I think the other lines with skill, if they play hard-nosed hockey like the fourth line is, the other stuff will follow. And
John, do you remember Mike Babcock's rule?
Which of the Babcock rules?
Yeah, which one, right? His line all the time was will before skill.
Yep.
And I think and I love that line because at the level that we're at, it's the one thing you can sell because some players think they have more skill than they do. But regardless of that, it's the will before the skill. And I think sometimes it's the other way around.
So that leads me to my question, though, which is, I look at the scoring lines and I see some underperforming. We all do. But there's one guy that really stands out to me in a positive way, and that's Matt Duchene. I thought he was fantastic. He was a millimeter or less away from having a power play goal. I thought it was in. We talked about that goal being marginally over the line. We should have better technology, Sean. We've talked about this at length. It's a real shame that the NHL in 2025 doesn't have definitive technology to tell them whether or not the puck is in the net or not. But we're looking for Robertson. We're looking for Hintz. The interesting thing is if you go and look at the stats over the last month, both of those guys are some of the leading scorers in the entire NHL. So why do you think it is that we're all looking at these guys saying, Marchment scored a goal the other night and he was getting better, but he hasn't been as good since he came back from injury. Granlund is Granlund. Rantanen is still figuring it out with this team. Hintz and Robertson, people are all over them in the last couple of games because of the team performance and the results. But if the numbers suss out, they've been fantastic.
Let Sean start with us.
Well, to me, it's what have they done in those games against Edmonton and Colorado and Winnipeg and Tampa Bay. The numbers are great, and let's take another step further. I was telling Owen about this earlier today. It's just a thought of this is to further Lud's point, where good teams that you play all the time know what's going to happen. The Philadelphia Flyers know Thomas Harley's good, but they don't game plan their entire week around Thomas Harley. Thomas Harley has 15 goals this year. 14 are outside the division. He has 1 goal against the Central Division team, an overtime winner against the Utah Hockey Club. In his career, Thomas Harley has played 25 games against Minnesota, a combined 25 games against Minnesota, Winnipeg, and Colorado. 25 games, has 1 goal in his career against those 3 teams combined in his career. Who do you have to beat in the playoffs? You have to beat Winnipeg, you have to beat Minnesota, you have to beat Colorado. That's why we're concerned. It comes down to the spot of, I don't care about numbers and really what you do against Philly or Anaheim and all of that. You have to show up. And because we're in this spot where we're getting close to playoff time and we're looking, how can this team win 16 games between April 21st and June 18th or whatever it is? I need to see players step up against teams that know them and teams that are going to play them in the playoffs. That's why that's where the concern comes from. I don't care about the numbers. It's what are you going to be able to do against those teams, those top teams. And tonight's Minnesota is another example. You have to do it tonight against Minnesota. Show me you can do it against Minnesota, because that gives me much more confidence going into a playoff series.
It's kind of, for me, it's similar to the start of the season when we saw some guys not get off to good starts, but they had great years and they had great last months of the year and thought that you could just come here. And I don't want to put thoughts in their mind, but it seemed like they just came here and thought they were going to pick up where they left off. Well, you can't just take these 12 to 15 games off and say, we're going to be the same team we were during that 25, 30 game streak. It doesn't work like that. And I just want to say, Matt Duchene, when you mentioned Matt Duchene, my impression of Matt Duchene is kind of, for some reason, the way that he plays, and you describe it well, is that when things aren't going well, Matt Duchene, to me, is like the guy that says, here, I'll show you how to do it. I'll go here. I'll go here. I'll do this harder. I'll go to the front of the net if I have to. I'll do the same. I don't know how many other guys who are the other guys, Sean, on this team that has that, here, follow me kind of guy. You know what I mean? Like it's different for fourth line guys because they're playing that similar, and they don't have the same skill level as everybody else, but you always look to your top guys. You know, I spent the afternoon with Joe Nieuwendyk, for instance. Like, Newey was one of those guys. Yuri Lettinen just played the way he did. Darian Hatcher was like that. Even Mo would go, okay, I'm going to pick the puck up and I'm going. So we had a bunch of those guys that did that. I'm sure there's other guys that you guys would say, yeah, he's kind of like that guy. But I feel like Matt Duchene, regardless of how the game is going, good or bad, he steps up at the proper times.
I want to ask you a follow-up, but go ahead, Sean.
To kind of add to Lud's point, we can talk about the fourth line doing well and everything like that. The fourth line doesn't have the cachet to effectively lead. It's a very cruel way to say this, but if the fourth line does their job, they're effectively playing for their job. They're not going to take anyone else's job higher in the lineup. We've talked about that kind of myth before of people playing for jobs and everything like that. And so as a fourth line guy, you can provide some energy and teams can maybe build off a little bit of energy, but it's not like you can set an example. And that's where Lud's point about Duchene. And it's something that we've seen Jamie do it at times, and probably not enough this year, especially during this stretch where you need someone in that grouping who is going to kind of put a team on their back for a shift here or two. And I think that's something, Luds, where I think, like, one of the things I'm excited about the long term with Mikko Rantanen is, and I know people in Colorado are, because they're a bit butthurt right now, are going to say Rantanen was a McKinnon merchant of points and all of that, but I watched a ton of Colorado hockey. I watched Mikko Rantanen as a leader in Colorado, and I watched how he would do that at times. And I think Rantanen still has to find his fit in Dallas on that, but in the long term, that's something that I think Rantanen starts to become that guy as he becomes more comfortable with this team, finds his fit, things along those lines.
Joe and I were talking about that.
Oh, were you?
Do we got to go to break here?
You have 20 seconds.
Go ahead.
Or so.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
We can talk about it
Let's
later.
come back with that because I have more to get to on that here in a moment on the DLS Stars Pregame Show. Let's talk about Sleeper, the best fantasy league platform out there. Fantasy League. Make sure I enunciate. Put your puck or ball knowledge to the test by picking whether your favorite or least favorite players will have more or less than their projected stats each week. In a moment, our producer John is going to have his picks for tonight's action. We'll get into that, and you know he is going to triple down on one of them. We'll see if it comes to fruition or not. With Sleeper, the more picks you combine, the more you can win, all the way up to 100 times your money. Sleeper keeps you in the loop with instant alerts for breaking news and major injuries. Stay ahead of the game and keep track of lineup and league updates in real time so you're always informed and ready to outsmart your friends. If you think you have what it takes, new users can download the Sleeper app and use the code DLLS Stars to get $55 in free entries when you place a $5 contest. Apply to any contest, doesn't have to be your first. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. Check out Sleeper today. Now, here's John.
And my mic is muted, so good thing I looked down there. We've got a killer entry coming in for you guys, and this thing was about to slip back to our buddy Sam when the Stars went on the road, so I don't know if I'm going to have to keep doing these picks or not.
Might have to pick him up there,
Sammy
John.
Street Clothes is playing hooky right as it's time for him to start making sleeper picks again. So Matt Boldy, he is a scorer, he is a shooter, and he is 6th in the NHL in shots on goal. So let's take Matt Boldy to record more than 3.5 shots on goal tonight. Jason Robertson, this one's going to juice the entry for us. Minnesota, 30th on the penalty kill. Let's take Robo to record more than 0.5 power play points. And I have completely chickened out. Esa Lindell, less than 2.5 blocks. We're not going more on this anymore. Nope. And I know he's going to have 9 blocked shots tonight, but we're going less on this. We have the data. We have the sample size. Esa Lindell, less than 2.5 block shots. $10, put it together, gets you $103.70, gentlemen.
Thank you, John, and I'm wishing you the best of luck tonight. I think it was 3 in a row you went with the 2.5, so we're trying on that. All right. You were talking with Joe Neuendijk. I want to pick back up on that conversation.
Well, it reminded me when Sean had mentioned Mikko Rantanen, and I'd said to Nui when we were talking about it, I said, when you got traded, you had been traded 2-3 times, whatever it was. I said, and you came into another team, like how was the chemistry of guys? And I said, did it get to a point where you said you went to the coaches and said this or that and all this other kind of stuff? And he goes, yeah. He goes, but I was lucky. He goes, when I went here, I was with good players, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And then we started talking about Rantanen. And then obviously we get into the whole playing with Nathan McKinnon and McCarr and all that. And I just said to him, I said, for me, I said the line that he's on right now, and we started talking about Rope. And I said, man, he goes, yes, he's fast. He goes, I don't think it's the right guy for him.
Interesting.
And then so we kind of went into that little topic, and then I just said, he goes, well, who do you think you should play with? And I said, well, my feeling is, I said, Wyatt. And he goes, that's the guy. And I'm like, I'm so happy to hear you say that, Nui, because I feel like I'm vindicated. Because Wyatt can do a whole bunch of things, right? Rope with the speed, Rantanen's not a fast skater. Robo's not a fast skater. And so sometimes the plays that Rantanen's looking for, and then he started talking about the power play. So, he, down in that spot, that's the only spot he is. And I said, well, now they're kind of putting him up here. They put him up at top last game. And he goes, yeah. He goes, I can see they're trying to find, things with him. But he goes, that player needs the right people to play with. When he was playing with McKinnon did all the work for the most part. His speed but when you look at it, I don't even know what McKinnon's points are, but he's got to be somewhere around 70 assists or something like that.
Yes, plus 7. I think it was close to 75.
75. Okay, yep. So he's a distributor, right? I mean, I think of him all the time as this all-around player, but he's more obviously when you look at numbers from 75 assists to 25, 30 goals, whatever he has. It tells you he's a distributor.
I was wrong. It's 77.
Okay,
105 points.
So do we look at Rupe, to me, has some kind of thing going on with Robo, but I don't know if he's a distributor more than he is a speedster that backs people off and allows pockets of areas for people to skate into. So,
Sean, what do you think?
Well, for one, I don't think Rantanen only fed off McKinnon. I want to be clear on one thing. It's also okay to point out the Stars don't have anyone as good as Nathan McKinnon. So let's also just be a bit clear on that. It's so that I think has to be established. But the thing about McKinnon's game to me, that is so impressive and something that Rantanen did build off of. And I think it's something that either Hintz or Johnston, and McKinnon's timing in his game, Luds, and I'm sure you watch this when you see Colorado play. McKinnon's timing is impeccable. The speed and the size and the strength, it's awesome. But we talk all the time about the arriving at the right time and knowing when and where to stop and where to make that play. And those are the things that when Rope is engaged, he does that, but there's times where he does a little bit of that flyby at the end. And we've seen a little bit more of the flyby with Rope right now. Wyatt doesn't do that. Wyatt goes to the right spots all the time. He doesn't have if we're going to talk about A and B games, Wyatt's B game is better than Rope's B game. So I think that's where I kind of come at from this, where I think Hintz can be that guy with Mikko, but the problem is his B game, his game where I'm doing the little flybys, doesn't work. And that's also one of the reasons where if you want to have the larger Rope Hintz conversation, it's why he's a great player and not one of the NHL's best players. That's probably the difference for Rope. If he did what he did on peak Rope night every single night, I mean, he'd be a 100-point guy as well. So,
and that's something that Pete actually brought that up recently, saying he has the ability to be a top 10 player in this league if he could find that consistency.
Oh, is it consistency, or is it? I mean, it's consistency, but find that consistency. What is it about his play? Is it just a mentality, attitude thing, or is it a health thing, or what is it? To me, there's nothing about Hintz's game where physically you're like, oh well, he can't do that every night. So it comes down to a mentality thing for me.
Well, and I don't know if this plays into what we're talking about, but I have, how I've said, sometimes you get hit with a shot and you're down and out for
what about the other thing where you say if something good happens to him early, it gets him going?
Anytime he gets a point or two in the first period, he seems to be on fire.
Yeah.
For that entire game. So I think he needs to have success. He needs to be on the scoreboard. And it's really that. I mean, it's not about physicality or things like that. But, I think once he gets that offensive confidence going, then it seems like everything else takes over. And if he has a hard time, which again, this drives me back to the playoffs, because you're going to know what people's strengths are and what to take them and what to give them. And so that would worry me that you can't or you don't push through that.
All right, we have a lot to get to, and we have not a lot of time left. First, let's do a super chat real quick because Ryan Doyle fired in
Bing bang
a DeSmith 99 cup here. Ludwig, how are your kids, and are we going to win?
Well, my kids apparently they're okay. They're doing all right. Are we going to win?
It feels like an inside joke here.
Yeah, I don't know. Are we going to win? Tonight we're going to win. Yeah, we always beat Minnesota, don't we?
Except for after Christmas when they coughed up the lead and lost in overtime.
We'll beat Minnesota. I think the guy that usually puts Dallas on the power play has kind of gotten a little bit back into form, and so I think we may not see as many trips to the power play part of the game tonight. We'll see.
Well, let's take a look at Lud's had a comparison graphic of the two teams that you has to get put together tonight. Would you explain it for the viewers?
Well, I think playoffs to me are always about this, but special teams and goaltending are, we could say this every single night, but when you look at this kind of stuff and you look at the power play for Dallas and where they're at versus the power play and penalty kill for the other team, we're winning both categories for the most part. But I think that penalty kill for Minnesota is changing a little bit, and they're staying out of the box a little bit more. So I think the more that you can earn on that, to me, that's where that edge is. When it comes to goaltending, we know Gustavsson has been lights out this year, and his save percentage is actually, you can see where they are. And the goals against is about the same, and save percentage is a little bit favoring over there. So to me, it's about finding ways to shut down the opportunities I get. And then I mentioned Ryan Hartman. Hartman has been back for 9 games, I believe it is. He's taken 2 penalties since he's been back. One's a fighting, so that wasn't a penalty. As a matter of fact, the guy that he fought ended up in the box for 2 minutes, and the other one was just a minor. In those 9 games, he's got 6 points. He's got 4 goals and 2 assists. 4 of those points, 2 and 2, come on the power play. So now I think he's staying out of the penalty box, and he's starting to be a little bit more. He's finding a way to still be him without going to the box, which I think we've capitalized. It seems to me like when he's in the box, we kind of capitalize a little bit more when he's in there. So I think that those couple of things I look at tonight, it could be keys to tonight's game.
All right, Sean, I want to ask you about Filip Gustavsson. He was
Real
the
quick,
NHL goal player of the week for this week. I believe it was week 22. There he is, number one star of the week, 3 wins. Look at the goals against and save percentage numbers. He is a huge part of why Minnesota is in a playoff spot right now, especially with all the man games lost, with Kirill Kaprizov, who was having an MVP caliber year until it was cut short. They're talking about him maybe starting to skate within a couple of days, but he's still not available. Eriksson Ek is still out. Foligno is out tonight. Jonas Brodin came back, but they're being careful with him, so he's not playing tonight. Why has Gustafsson been so good?
Easy for you to say.
Well, we talked. We had the whole myth busting last week of can Casey DeSmith actually push Jake Oettinger? Well, Gustafsson's at a legit spot to be pushed. Let's talk about that. One reality is Gustafsson. Yes, he and Marc-Andre Fleury are. We know this is the end of Marc-Andre Fleury's career at the end of this season, and so. It's effectively Gustafsson is the number one, but Gustafsson has been playing for proof that he's the long-term number one this year. I mean, it's Jesper Wallstedt is considered, him and Yaroslav Askarov are considered 2 of the best goalie prospects in the world right now. And so when the Wild have Jesper Wallstedt, who is a lot of people see as the future number one goalie and already has a nickname from the fans. They call him the Great Wall of St. Paul. There is a there's a legit pressure-packed moment for Gustafsson this year to come in and perform. And it's easy to connect everything back to the Stars because this is a Stars show, but I'm going to go back to that, where Gustafsson to me is a guy who has been playing with a little bit of, I am the guy, this is going to be my net, and I'm not going to let someone come and take it. And it's something I'd love to see Jake Oettinger do, because there's no chance Casey DeSmith actually takes his net. So to me, I'm going to connect it back to that, because it's something where when you do the side-by-side save percentage and goals against average for the two, they both started games for their teams at Four Nations. They're both very similar in that realm. I think one has a little bit more to prove, and we're seeing a little bit of that. So this goes back to last week, lads. I'd love to see Pete DeBoer tell Jake Oettinger, hey, if you keep playing this way, Casey DeSmith's getting game 1. I'd love to see Pete have the chutzpah to do it.
Hey, Sean, yeah, and I had a chance. I was with Eddie also today, and so we got into that kind of conversation too. But what is, if you give me one thing that Gustafsson that makes him special? Is there one thing? Can you point to one thing, or is it just a combination of a couple things?
For me, it's this year in particular, it's the foundation down low and the skating. He reads plays really well, but one of the things, his play reading was always pretty good at Gustafsson. But for me, one of the things kind of watching this year as he's taken another step in his play is he doesn't have as many of those leaky holes down low. And so when you build that strong foundation down low, you get the pads sealed on the ice more consistently. It's very hard to beat him on the ice now, an area he was maybe struggled a little bit before. It makes shooters overly think. It's all goes back to, it's just like building a house. A strong foundation at the bottom has really just kind of allowed everything else to come together up top.
All right, guys, we have a couple of things left, and I want to throw something at you, but let's take a quick look at the lineups. Here's the Dallas Stars forward group. No changes, as you see. Maverick Bourque will be a healthy scratch for the second straight game. Dodonov looked good after 2 games as scratch, had some jump in his game. We'll see if some other guys can add to that up front. Look at the back end. No changes here. Liam Bichel, and I had a nice conversation with him today. He said he does not do a lot of pre-scout work on other guys that might be more agitating than others. He just goes out there and plays. He says, you're aware when heavy guys are on the ice. He goes, but hockey, you need to know how to take a hit as well as dish them out. And, of course, Oettinger and net. Then we look at the Minnesota Wild. They are going to play, of course, without both their big, tough Marcus Foligno and Joel Eriksson Ek, in addition to, of course, Kaprizov. They are missing some big pieces, but Matt Boldy, who showed out very well at the Four Nations, is their leading scorer. He, along with Zuccarello on that top line. Of course, they added Gus Nyquist.
There's only been 2 guys, at least in their last 10 games, Zuccarello and Gaudreau are the only 2 guys that have been scoring for this team. And again, I talk about Hartman, and we'll see. They've got some size, though. I think that can be an issue, too. I mean, you look at Trenton, you look at Boldy, and Boldy is somewhere around the 260 shots, so he gets pucks to the net, but he generally transports them to the net with the big body.
Take a look at the defense real quick. And, of course, they're missing Brodin. He's a very important piece. They do have Middleton back, who was hurt the last time these two teams met, which was a while ago now. They'll play one more time next month in Minnesota, and Gustavsson gets the start. But this is what I wanted to leave you guys on. The Wild have the second best road record in the NHL as far as points and point percentage, as a very, very impressive 47 points in 35 games, 671 road point percentage. And at home, they are tied for 21st with only a 543 home point percentage. They're minus 11 in goal differential at home. They're plus 10 on the road. So you would say they're just not a very good home team. Well, in the last 10 games or so, last 7 road games, they're 2-5. That's not good. And in the last, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 home games, they are 7-3-1 since February 1st. So what's the difference? Well, they can't score on the road, and they're giving up over 4 goals a game. They are scoring 2.45 goals at home, which isn't great, but they're giving up 1.91. So they have figured out in the last month and a half how to play at XL Energy Center, but this game is here. So maybe that great road record.
Back to, because again, ever since Jacques Demers was in that organization, they haven't really lost that foundation of trying to defend. And when you're missing a couple big bullets out of your lineup, which they have been for a long time, but they're getting to that time of the year. Here's the way that if we're going to beat anybody, whoever it's going to be, we're not probably going to outscore them. And so I think that they're trying to get into that shape.
Sean, on the last thought from the Stars' perspective, they've kind of struggled to be as offensive in the last few games that they normally have. And if Luds is right and the Wild are going to play a very safe defensive game, maybe it's just going to be a really low-scoring affair.
Well, it could be, but that would mean the Wild dictated how the game is played. I hope after the game, the Stars dictate how this game is played. And that would be something I've wanted to see from the Stars for the last couple of games now. They let Tampa dictate the game, and then they let Philly dictate the game. So if you're the Stars, go out and dictate how the game's going to be played. Show me that, and we'll have a really fun, happy postgame show.
Sounds good, guys. For John, Sean, and Craig, I'm Owen. Thanks for joining us. We will be here for the full postgame show right after tonight's Stars and Wild game at the AAC. Sam, feel better, bud.
I believe that they are going to crush these guys tonight.
We all silly like the mayor.